Question 8 has been withdrawn, and I call Stuart Dixon. Stuart Dixon.
Mr. Speaker.
I have not yet received an invoice. I am unable to provide an update on the total cost of the legal advice I have received in relation to halting sanitary and phytosanitary checks at the points of entry.
Supplementary, Stuart Dixon.
Thank you very much, Minister, for a somewhat disappointing answer. However, Minister, do you agree with me that sanitary and phytosanitary checks at the points of entry to uphold animal welfare and food goods standards are vitally important for us? And how are we going to deal with the standards of the UK, New Zealand, Australia Free Trade Agreement, because that definitely threatens our food standards and our regulations?
I certainly don't agree that is necessary. In the first instance, food that is coming into Northern Ireland, that is to remain in Northern Ireland, poses zero threat to the European Union single market. The fact that the Alliance Party today, through Mr Dixon, has indicated that it wants to have checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which is going to lead to less supply for consumers, which is going to lead to higher cost to consumers, which is going to lead to a reduction in the offer made to consumers, demonstrates beyond reasonable doubt that the Alliance Party is more interested in the politics of the European Union than it is about the people that they actually serve.
I call Philip McGuigan.
Minister, in previous written and oral questions, including just there now, you haven't given an answer provided to the question of costs to halting sanitary and phytosanitary checks. Can you confirm how much was paid to the Attorney-General for his advice, and was he paid out of public money?
Well, we haven't got a bill. The Attorney-General is a female, not a male, and the Attorney-General doesn't charge for their advice.
Call Matthew O'Toole.
Mr. Speaker, I know the Agriculture Minister has not made clear why he chose not to take legal advice from the current Attorney-General rather than the former one. But can I ask about the New Zealand Free Trade Deal, which was signed yesterday? Minister, last year you said you had been clear with UK ministers that tariff-free access to the UK for New Zealand farmers poses a very serious threat to our farmers. What went wrong, Minister? Did the UK minister simply not listen to you?
Well, first of all, the member makes an assumption that I didn't receive advice from the current Attorney-General, and indeed from DSO and others. So the member would be well aware that that is purely an assumption and does not stand any veracity. But nonetheless, we'll leave that to one side. New Zealand trade deal. Of course, I have demonstrated quite clearly my concerns about potential trade deals. There are trade deals which will bring us significant benefits and open the doors for Northern Ireland to actually export its high-quality food. And there are quite a number of trade deals that have actually taken place already, which will be to our benefit. The New Zealand trade deal and Australian trade deal will always be challenging to us because they are large food-producing countries. But there are opportunities for other businesses in Northern Ireland, not least those people who are exporting engineering expertise, for example, to Australia, through all of the mining equipment that is produced mainly in mid-Ulster. So there are advantages to these deals as well as disadvantages. Disadvantages will take time if they come through, because at this moment in time Australia is selling a large amount of its beef in Southeast Asia and consequently doesn't need the UK market. But that may not always be the case. So I have highlighted concerns and expressed my concerns about that. That said, whenever we left the European Union, our beef was about 20% lower in price than it currently is now. So it's hard for the member to claim that we have done badly out of it.
Jim Allister.
Does the Minister agree that it is telling that the Alliance Party and the other rigorous implementers of the protocol are obsessing about what, in contrast, will be the modest cost of legal advice which established that the checks were unlawful, in contrast to the figure that the Minister gave last month of £10 million of costs of those checks, never mind the tens of millions of costs to business and under the TSS? Isn't that a telling insight into where the interests of such questioners lie?
Absolutely. And the thousands of checks, the CHEDs that have to be produced by business, and the additional staff that had to be recruited by business as a consequence of the protocol, the services provided by TSS, which will be withdrawn, and ultimately that cost passed, the European Union's demand that we should be passing all of the costs that the government currently bears, this department currently bears, to business, and the fact that the European Union even want us to check people's cars and their luggage. That's what the Alliance Party are wanting, and that's why the Alliance Party have shown themselves up today in their demand for the rigorous implementation of the protocol.
I call Roy Beggs.
I thank the Minister for his answer today. And the questions around legal costs. But there is an additional cost in terms of transport arrangements and bureaucracy, a cost to business when some suppliers do not even continue to supply Northern Ireland. So my question to the Minister is, what assessment has been the detrimental impact of the Northern Ireland economy and the public, who, for example, can't even buy some of their plants in their garden centres?
Well, the fact is that it's easier currently to import a tree from Lithuania than it is from Lancashire. Now, that mightn't be the case whenever Mr. Putin's finished. But that's the reality, folks. We have a country where there's a barrier put within that country. That has never been tried in any other country in the world. And the fact that we have individuals in this country saying, we want more of it. We want more of it. Mr. Poots, you haven't done enough on the protocol. We want you to do more to make it difficult for people to buy goods from their own country. That is an outrageous situation, it's an outrageous proposal.
I don't want to have to keep intervening, but I will insist that we get order to continue on with the question time that we have in front of us. Anya Murphy.
The Independent Strategic Review of the Northern Ireland Agri-Food Sector report was published on the 26th of January. Sir Peter Kendall and his team undertook a considerable amount of work in a short time frame, under very challenging conditions presented by COVID-related restrictions. I welcome the report and believe it contains much the industry will support. The report has been open to comments and feedback from stakeholders on the 23rd of February. Given the many recommendations of the report, it will take time to produce a detailed and considered response that takes into account the views of stakeholders.
Supplementary, Anya Murphy.
I'd like to thank the Minister for his answer. Minister, can you confirm whether you intend to include the Independent Strategic Review recommendations in the development of future agricultural policies?
Well, certainly we will consider the report in full, and we didn't ask for a report to be carried out to then ignore it. So we will look at it in detail, and we will, I'm quite sure, adopt most of what is in it. That's not to say that we will ever form out our decision-making to somebody else to adopt everything, but nonetheless we will be adopting substantial parts of this report.
Harry Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for his answers thus far. Minister, in light of the devastating developments in Ukraine, does it not further highlight the need to retain food production capacity within this region and not rely on others?
I think it would be remiss if I didn't express my solidarity with the people of Ukraine at this moment in time. I think it's absolutely repellent that a sovereign nation has been invaded by another nation, and the consequences of it are awful for the people in Ukraine first and foremost, and there will be many thousands of people lose their lives. And I think, quite frankly, that the response from NATO countries has been poor in the first instance, and had more been done to avert this, then we may not be in that circumstance. Nonetheless, we are in that circumstance, and there are some realities that people need to realise. Number one, Ukraine is a country with the capacity to feed 600 million people. If that capacity is taken away, we are in a situation across the world where the amount of food available to the numbers of people is quite balanced. So if the farmers can't get ploughing their land and putting their crops in, or get selling their meat out of Ukraine, then we've got a problem. Number two, Russia is one of the biggest suppliers of nitrogen fertilizer in the world. If farmers don't get nitrogen fertilizer to spread on their crops will deliver less yield, and the consequence of that is significant. Number 3, Russia is one of the biggest suppliers, second biggest supplier of oil and gas in the world, and the consequences of that for oil prices are very significant, which again feeds through to food prices. Number 4, Ukraine is one of the richest countries in terms of minerals, including titanium, uranium and other products. So all of these things will have implications, and the consequences of it will be far-reaching. And if anybody doesn't realise that, they're going to realise that in the months to come.
Matthew O'Toole.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Minister's answer, and I echo his warnings around the importance of food security and issues around supply chain. But can I ask on the independent strategic review, one of the things that independent strategic review majors on is the importance of exports. And of course, we have this situation where we have access to the EU single market. Now, if we all agree that we want streamlined movement of goods in from GB into Northern Ireland, does he agree that it is a good thing that Northern Ireland food producers retain untrammelled access to sell into the EU single market, unlike in GB?
Yes, I do, and I actually welcome what the members just said in terms of wanting to have streamlined access from GB to Northern Ireland. I actually want complete access, but I think that that's a significant step forward from the rigorous implementation of the protocol to streamlined access from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. So the SDLP has certainly moved well ahead of the Alliance Party, and I congratulate the member on doing that.
I call Alan Chambers. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, Minister, has any of the information from the Ulster Farmers Union report produced by Kpmg been utilised in any reviews carried out by your department? Thank you.
It wasn't commissioned by the department, but the department do take note of its findings. And interestingly enough, whenever we talk to the Climate Change Committee, the findings in the Kpmg report coincide with the views of the Climate Change Committee. The Kpmg report is a credible report, and therefore is something that we all need to take cognizance of in our decision-making approach going forward.
I call Gemma Dolan.
Question number 3.
In order to ensure that rural communities will continue to receive support when the Rural Development Programme came to an end, officials in my department began work on the Rural Policy Framework for Northern Ireland. In addition, my department has taken the opportunity to deliver a range of pilot schemes that will help to inform future funding programmes while ensuring the continued delivery of programmes and funding to rural communities. The framework is nearing completion, and work will soon begin on developing a new rural business and community investment programme. The new programme will replace the leader and tourism elements of the Rural Development Programme. And as these new programmes are designed to replace the Rural Development Programme, I do not anticipate any adverse impact on rural communities from the absence of the EU Rural Development Programme. On the contrary, the opportunity we now have through the Rural Policy Framework to address the needs of rural communities provides us with the opportunity to enhance the support we provide and target our investment to address the most pressing needs of rural communities.
Gemma Dolan, supplementary.
Minister, the former EU Rural Development Programme was a ring-fenced, dedicated pot of money for rural communities, which is in stark contrast to the British Government's Levelling Up plan, which will see rural communities in the north having to compete for funding against big infrastructure projects in cities such as Manchester. When that's the case, are we really expected to believe that our rural communities will get anything like their fair share?
Well, of course, that would be down to the Department of Finance, and thus far from the budget proposals, maybe not. So the member will be as well talking to the Finance Minister to perhaps get a budget that would reflect the needs of the rural community, would reflect the needs of tackling the issues around carbon neutrality, of the investment that is needed to ensure that we deliver for the environment, and that we can actually head towards net zero on the basis of having the funding from the Department of Finance to do that.
William Irwin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for his answer so far in relation to questions. Minister, could you provide an update on the Rural Halls pilot and the next steps for those that are eligible but did not fall within the first 50 that received funding?
Yes, the Rural Halls scheme thus far has been exceptionally successful. So we have had a full rollout of the first pilot in terms of the applications that have come in. We have been able to provide financial support and training, and looking at the next stages of the Rural Halls scheme. So we are bidding for funding to ensure that we can deliver for all of the applicants, because all of the applicants merit support. And the result of that work that has been done is that many, for example, parent and toddler groups have had better facilities to work in. Many women's groups, older people's groups, indeed youth organisations, so a wide range of people in the rural community have benefited significantly from this scheme, and that's why we want to roll this out to all of the halls that applied, because they are applying for things such as new electrics, new plastering to deal with damp. These are halls which haven't received funding before, but they're part of the hub of their communities and are essential to those communities.
I thank the Minister for his answers so far. Could I ask the Minister what discussions in relation to rural development programmes and rural development funds, what discussions the Minister has recently had with either or the Minister for Finance and the Treasury around replacement or substitute funding for that?
Well, we certainly talked to the Minister for Finance before and during the budget process. We have indicated very clearly what the needs are for the budget process. When it comes to levelling up, we will ensure that our voice is heard on that particular issue. And indeed, some of our MPs have been indicating that Northern Ireland hasn't done as well out of levelling up as Scotland and Wales at this stage. And we will ensure that Northern Ireland's voice is heard and that the opportunities for the levelling up to take place are actually carried through. And I would really love to see some real signature projects happening in Northern Ireland on the back of it. One that I think needs to be delivered in terms of the rural community and in terms of the agri-food community is a new veterinary college. And the delivery of a veterinary college in Northern Ireland will demonstrate to everybody else the sustainability of our agricultural industry, and that it will be a significant step forward for that. And I trust that other parties will be supportive of a new veterinary college here in Northern Ireland.
Paul Kelly-Armstrong.
Our young people are key to safeguarding our environment and tackling the biodiversity crisis. Acknowledging this, DAERA funds Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful deliver the Eco Schools programme in Northern Ireland. This highly successful endeavour makes environmental awareness and action an intrinsic part of the life and ethos of our schools, with a focus on practical, positive environmental behavioural change. Since 2020, Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful has progressed 2 programmes which focus on biodiversity in schools through the development of school garden projects. The Productive Biodiversity Gardens programme, in partnership with Radius Housing, has involved 16 primary schools to date, and the upcoming stage will involve a further 23 primary schools. The Productive Outdoor Learning Gardens programme is delivered in partnership with the Danske Bank and created an outdoor learning space in 11 schools, with a further 11 to be developed. Work is also underway to support the development of a new GCSE module around biodiversity recovery, and biodiversity was listed as one of the 3 key topics in nearly half of the most recent tranche of Green Flag applications, showing the importance placed on biodiversity by our young people. The Tackling Plastic project, in partnership with Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful, aims to raise awareness of the problem of single-use plastics and provide support in reducing consumption. All schools here have been given resources on plastic and marine environments, and school workshops have been delivered to complete single-use plastic audits and action plans to help them reduce consumption. Additionally, 11 webinars were delivered focusing on tackling single-use plastics, and 75 schools have signed the Plastic Promise, making a commitment to reduce single-use plastics at school and at home. In 21-22, my department provided funding to the Lyric Theatre to continue the delivery of a short performance piece around waste prevention and plastic pollution, and that will be performed to an audience of over 3,000 key Stage 2 pupils and offer children solutions that they can easily understand and undertake. The Plastic in Schools competition, delivered in partnership with Queen's University, Department of Education, Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful, gives pupils an opportunity to win monetary prizes for work on investigating the use and disposal of single-use plastics in their school. The rural pollinator scheme.
Hour's time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Supplementary, Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you very much for the Minister for that. I'm sorry you were cut off in full flow there. Minister, local schools in my area have been out beach walking in the last few weeks. Could I ask you then, in the area of biodiversity, there are over 2,000 different types of marine species living within Strangford Lough. Can I ask the Minister what progress his department has made during the mandate to protect important marine life and their habitats?
Well, we're doing a key piece of work on MPAs, marine protected areas, and that is something which we are hoping to deliver in 2024 in conjunction with developing a blue carbon policy. And evidently, we can see the benefits in ensuring that our seas around us, which form around a third of our biodiversity, actually is something that we invest in, something that we identify in terms of protection, and something that we can ensure at the same time that people who live and work in those places can continue to enjoy that habitat and earn a living off it. One of the things that we have been looking at is the moorings for yachts in Strangford, and how we can ensure that those moorings do not cause damage to key parts of the seabeds, and therefore there is pieces of work already taking place in terms of Strangford Lough.
Collection Riley.
A huge amount of engagement with young people on this issue in particular is carried out by groups such as the Belfast Hills Partnership, who actually launched their Wild Youth Programme earlier on this month. So what engagement does the Department have with groups such as the Belfast Hills Partnership when it comes to supporting campaigns around young people?
Well, recently we supported the acquisition of a substantial land tract in the Belfast Hills for the Woodland Trust, and we have further support now going to the National Trust to acquire land. All of this land will become accessible to the public, will be planted out and used in a way which supports biodiversity in the Belfast Hills and create that access for the young people who live in the area and indeed for people who visit the area.
Down Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Minister, would you agree with me that farmers play a vital role in managing our natural environment and in encouraging biodiversity, and without their work there would be much greater land abandonment in Northern Ireland? And would you further agree with me that farmers are part of the solution to our climate issues rather than part of the problem, as some in this House would suggest?
Well, thank the member for raising the point, because land abandonment is a significant issue, and was a significant issue a number of years ago in Scotland when many crofters left the land. And the consequence of the wilding that took place was that it led to less biodiversity. And people need to waken up to the fact and realise the fact that managed land can improve biodiversity, and that wilding land very often leads to less biodiversity. Farmers are keen to engage in all of these things. Farmers are keen to ensure that they can improve the biodiversity on their land, and we see that in the uptake of schemes around environmental farming scheme and other schemes whereby they are out there, they're planting trees, they're planting new hedges, they're putting in protections to waterways and so forth. So there is a lot of work that's going on in the farming community and a real desire to do more.
Steve Egan.
I thank the Minister for his answer so far. Minister, and I make a declaration of interest here as a governor at an excellent primary school, Kilbride Central Primary School, but we do have an election, so I'll mention that anyhow. One of the big questions we have had is we want to do some planting. We want to do some planting of trees. But we're finding it enormously difficult to source trees because of the problems we have for the protocol. What could the Minister say? What could we do to sort this ridiculous situation out?
Well, I'm delighted that, first of all, Kilbride, the excellent primary school that you mentioned, is desirous to do that. And I would encourage them to apply for the community rural pollinator scheme, because we're making 1.51 million available to up to 183 applicants. So it would be good if that school was one of them. In terms of the issue that he's raised, this is a political issue that needs to be resolved between the UK government, who introduced the protocol, and the European Union to resolve in a way which protects the European Union single market, but also ensures that the single market between Great Britain and Northern Ireland is protected. And I believe that both of those things are attainable, and I think the European Union in particular need to recognise the problems they are causing and the reality that they will achieve what nobody else has been capable of achieving, and that will be to grind to a halt the political aspect of the peace process in Northern Ireland. That will be on the hands of the European Union if they choose to dig their heels in and not cooperate.
Deborah Erskine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 5, please.
A sustainable catchment pilot project to address water quality issues has started recently and is being delivered in partnerships with the Rivers Trust across the 3 catchments in Dundrum, Ballinderry and Upper Bann. The project provides advice combined with capital support to farmers to implement on-farm measures which aim to reduce impacts on the water environment. Last summer I visited the Upper Bann catchment where my department has established a research project in collaboration with AFBI, introduced our pilot soil analysis scheme and environmental farming scheme group project. It was encouraging to meet the scientists and farmers and hear that we are starting to see improvements in water quality. Furthermore, I intend to consider the findings from the public consultation on a wide range of options for Northern Ireland's first clean air strategy. I will also give further consideration as to how a pilot catchment sensitive scheme to address air quality issues could be integrated into the strategy.
Deborah Erskine, supplementary.
And I thank the Minister for his answer. I'm sure he is aware in terms of health and well-being how important strategies like this are for those who perhaps suffer from lung conditions, for example. And given the apparent success of the catchment-sensitive farming scheme employed in England, can you update the House on how this scheme works? And would you commit to delivering a number of specific pilots in the near future?
Yeah, well, CAFRE Advisory Service was set up in April 2018 as a single advisory service to provide advice and support to potential applicants. Sustainable Land Management and CAFRE delivers advice to farmers across the key areas of air quality, biodiversity, land management and water quality. And in collaboration with AFBI, they have delivered a pilot scheme which included soil testing, nutrient advice. And the Department has secured funding to roll that out further. In terms of the catchments that are prioritised, we look at the status of the water body, whether it's deteriorated or stagnated, the environmentally protected areas that the water body support. And I know this is particularly important in County Fermanagh because there's a lot of water there, and whether they're experiencing pressures related to water environment, and whether the water bodies are upstream of areas of potential significant flood risk. So there's a considerable course of work that is being done here, and I think that particularly in a constituency like Fermanagh South Tyrone, it is important that we ensure that water quality as well as air quality is improved.
John Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, in the UK, between 28,000 and 36,000 people a year die with illnesses attributed to long-term exposure to air pollution. Yet in Northern Ireland we still have no air quality strategy to deal with this. My question to the Minister is, will he publish the Clean Air Strategy before the end of this mandate?
Well, we'll have the public consultation. It's important that we consider everything in that consultation. I personally would like to do it. I don't think that we will be capable of publishing it within this mandate. But that course of work is done. It's ready, and the considerations of that will take place during the Purdah period. The officials will still be working on it, and it will be something that will be ready and prepared for a new minister entering the department come the other side of an election. That is, if we have an executive to run a department.
And that ends the period for a list of questions, members, and we will now move on to 15 minutes of topical questions. I call Paula Bradshaw.
Speaker. Minister, I was contacted recently by a constituent who was concerned about some trees that have been felled in Beaver Forest Park. Now, I'm not questioning the rationale or the background to that work by your departmental officials, but I'm just wondering what your department's doing to actually protect and enhance the likes of Beaver Forest Park, Craigie Glen and other places in my constituency where my constituents enjoy walking. Thank you.
Well, our forest parks are very important to us, and we have made substantial investment in forest parks in conjunction with local authorities. And fantastic course of work has been carried out in a whole range of our forest parks. Indeed, I was most recently in Gortson Glen Forest Park, where there has been, again, substantial investment made in that area. But right across Northern Ireland, there's been a considerable amount of work done. There will always be tree felling in forest parks, by nature of it. Some of it will be to deal with ash dieback, for example, or other tree diseases. Some of it will be to remove trees and thin trees and allow greater biodiversity in areas of the forest, or indeed to create opportunity for new planting. So sometimes people see a tree being cut down and they don't like it, and that's understandable, but there is usually a very good reason for that to happen, particularly in our forest parks. Being destructive of good trees is not something which we're about.
Supplementary, Paula Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answer. And I'm just wondering, Minister, if you would support some of your departmental officials meeting with some residents on site. There's a new campaign called Save Our Lagan, which covers that whole sort of part of Stranmillis, Rosetta area. I'm just wondering if you would support your officials meeting with some local residents. Thank you.
Well, certainly if there's any requests from public representatives to meet members of the public who have concerns about anything that is going on in our properties, of course, we will always be willing and ready and prepared and open to meeting those people, discussing the issues with them and to hearing their concerns, because their concerns will very often be our concerns, and very often the general public are the first people to notice something that's not right and alert us to it.
Well, Rosemary Barton.
Minister, with the outbreak of war between Russia and the Ukraine, what effects will this have on the imports of animal foodstuffs and fertilizer for the farming community?
Well, Ukraine is a supplier of cereals to Northern Ireland, and consequently that has implications for the chicken, pork and dairy industry in particular. We will seek to identify other sources, which will probably be North American, but the consequence of prices going up is inevitable as a result of that, and therefore there is a significant issue there. As indicated in the previous answer, Russia is a big supplier of nitrogen, and therefore that causes its own problems. And I have absolutely no doubt that the sanctions that will be imposed upon Russia will lead to the availability of nitrogen being more challenging. That's a price that has to be paid, I have to say, because we cannot tolerate Russia's behaviour. But at the same time, it has a consequence, and has a consequence for the amount of food that we're currently capable of producing, because nitrogen is a key nutrient for our soils.
Supplementary, Rosemary Barton.
Thank you. Minister, therefore, given the answer that you've said, do you therefore foresee a global shortage in some of these products like fertilizer?
I think there is every possibility that we have food shortages this year on the back of what is happening in Russia and Ukraine, and people need to recognise and realise the risks that are involved. I am requesting a meeting with Secretary of State for DEFRA to discuss these issues and get a better handle of where we might stand on it. But I have my own obvious concerns as a consequence of what is going on. It'll be significantly greater than the consequences of Brexit, which people talk an awful lot about. And I put that out to this chamber. We really do need to be prepared for what might come if this turns into a prolonged war in Russia and Ukraine, and there's every likelihood of heading that way.
Emma Sheeran.
Margaret Kincorlia. Thank you, Minister, for your answers thus far. Can I get your assessment of the impact of your future agricultural policy on hill farmers, particularly sheep farmers in the hills?
Well, future agricultural policy is one that will seek to encourage people to actually farm and to encourage people to engage in farming activity. So whilst the greater volume of money remains with the land-based payment, there are some enticements, in particular for suckler cows, which is considerably beneficial to hill farms to move forward. The enticements are actually there to ensure that farmers can do it in a more environmentally friendly way, so having shorter periods to calving and shorter periods between calvings, and indeed reducing the time from birth until the animal goes to slaughter, will all help us to ensure that the carbon footprint that is produced in Northern Ireland is not just competitive but ahead of other places. And therefore those steps were taken in that area. Don't have the same opportunities to do that with sheep, and therefore they didn't get that enticement, I suppose, to improve their practice to the same extent. Nonetheless, sheep farming has done reasonably well over the course of this last 2 years.
Supplementary, Emma Sheeran.
And thank you, Minister, for your answer. Minister, it's almost 2 years since this House supported my party colleague Declan McAleer's proposal to reinstate the ANC payment. But instead of doing that, it appears that you are intent on doubling down on punishing sheep farmers in hill areas like the Sperrins in my own constituency in Mid-Ulster. Can I ask when you will start delivering for all farmers, including sheep farmers in LFA ANC areas?
Well, you see, as a result of the changes that took place, hill farmers were significantly advantaged some 10 years ago or thereabouts, and then the ANC was a payment on top of that. It was a payment that Minister O'Neill found unsustainable, and that's why she only extended it for 2 years and didn't make it a permanent extension. So you may want to contact Minister O'Neill, the former Deputy First Minister, and she will advise you as to why she wasn't able and the business plan and so forth didn't support her having ANC there on a permanent basis. That said, the average producer price for sheep has increased by 18%, from £4.52 per kilo deadweight in 2020 to £5.35 per kilo in 2021. The average prices in 2020 and 2021 were 11% and 32% respectively above the 10-year average for sheep prices. The latest statistics show that average farm business income of cattle and sheep LFA farms is expected to increase from £20,454 to £21,181, an increase of £727 or 4% per farm, whereas the average farm business income of cattle and lowland farms is expected to decrease from £21,242 to £20,793, a decrease of £449. So I think the member, if she wants to refer to fairness, would agree with me that we cannot take money off farmers whose income is going down to supplement farmers whose income is going up.
I call Diane Dodds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, would you like to outline for the House the impact on the agri-food sector of the full implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol?
Even with the grace periods, maybe will I give way to the real Minister, Mr. O'Toole? Even with the grace periods, Northern Ireland's point of entry are currently processing in excess of 2,500 common health entry documents per week, over 10,000 per month. Approximately 90% of these CHEDs relate to products of animal origin. They must be validated and recorded by one of my department's official veterinarians, a complete waste of their time. In addition, each consignment covered by a CHED requires an identity check, and European Union law dictates that a range of physical checks are also required, the frequency depending on the type of consignment. If the grace periods weren't in place, it is estimated that Northern Ireland's point of entry would be required to process in excess of 12,500 CHEDs per week across all consignment types. These would also require a significant number of identity and physical checks. Just to be clear, that is 5 times the amount of checks that is currently taking place.
Supplementary, Diane Dodds.
Thank Minister. I think the rigorous implementers may well want to think about these sort of statistics. Minister, Jacob Rees-Mogg was recently promoted in the Cabinet, and one of the first things he said is that he would like to have a bonfire of retained EU law. What would you like to see in the bonfire?
Thank the member for the leading question. Well, I think the first thing I'd put in the bonfire is a protocol, because the protocol, as it exists, is damaging to every single person in Northern Ireland because of the unnecessary and onerous burdens and checks that it puts in place. We can get a reasonable position with the European Union to provide the protections that they need, but ensure that there is no checks between Great Britain and Northern Ireland on products that are remaining in Northern Ireland. That is a reasonable outcome for the people of Northern Ireland. I see some Alliance members shaking their heads. I don't understand why they want to have checks on goods that remain in Northern Ireland. Our Asda's, our Sainsbury's, our Eurospars, Vivos, whoever it happens to be, pose no threat whatsoever to the European Union. And the consumers, the ladies and gentlemen and young people who are going in and out of those shops to buy goods don't need to have one of my vets checking those goods, because those goods are of the highest standards anywhere in the world that are coming from Great Britain, and we should ensure that as free an access as possible to those goods are available to each and every citizen.
Call earlier, Flynn.
And maybe just staying on the topic of the agri-food industry, the Minister will be aware of the labour shortages that are currently facing that industry, and I'm thinking of companies such as Moy Park. Could the Minister outline what steps he's taken to address some of those challenges?
We've engaged in numerous correspondence and indeed raised this verbally with UK ministers on a regular basis. Whether it's Mr Foster, previously Ms Truss and her roles, George Eustace and other ministers, we have ensured that they are very aware of the problems that the food industry is facing. It is not just the food industry here, it's the food industry right across the United Kingdom are facing these problems. And indeed, I'd have to say the food industry in the Republic of Ireland are facing problems as well. So it is not an issue about leaving the European Union has caused these problems. It is an issue of the government's policy on allowing people to come into the country. And of course, it is for the government to decide, but I'm making it very clear that we need more butchers, we need more people who can carry out that work in those factories. And it is sensible to have a migration policy which ensures that your businesses can operate in a fluid way. Previous policy, where it was an open door policy, was not one which was sustainable for the long term.
Supplementary, earlier, Flynn.
Yep, and I thank the Minister for the response. It does also appear that the labour shortage crisis, which we'll disagree has been caused by Brexit, is also getting worse for the food and drinks industry. And would it be a fair assessment that these shortages do pose a very serious threat to that food and drinks industry, similar to what you already warned about from the British Government's various free trade deals?
Well, I wouldn't put it just down to the food industry, I'd put it down to other areas, including health. And there is an availability of workers in many parts of the world who would love to come and work in Northern Ireland. There is an availability of jobs in Northern Ireland, be it in this engineering sector for welders, be it in the food sector for butchers, be it in the fishing sector for fishers, or indeed be it in the healthcare sector for care workers, etc. So we need to ensure that we continue to get the government into the right place and they make the right decisions, and that is to allow the requisite number of people to come into this country to fill jobs which are currently available. The other aspect of it, and I do agree with the government, there are people who are currently unemployed and on benefits who could be employed, and we need to continue to ensure that we drive and encourage those opportunities through, and ensure that people who are capable of taking up employment actually take those jobs. It's somewhat odd that someone from the Philippines could get a job here, but someone from here can't take those jobs themselves, and we need to continue to encourage that.
Time is up, members, and members, please take your ease for a moment.